Hi, I'm Anne Marie Anderson, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and on this episode, I'm joined by Anne Marie Anderson. Anne Marie is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, keynote speaker, and the author of Cultivating Audacity. From ESPN boardrooms to the sidelines of major sporting events, Anne Marie has spent her career observing high performers, coaches, athletes, and executives who consistently take bold risks. But audacity isn't just for elite athletes. It's something anyone can cultivate, and that's exactly what we dive into today. In this conversation, we explore what it really means to be audacious. It's not about one big daring move. It's about the micro risks that add up over time. And Anne Marie gets into that, as well as how to navigate fear instead of trying to eliminate it, how to differentiate urgency from importance, and why setting bold goals doesn't mean you have to burn out. We also dive into the idea of personal experiments in Audacity, from writing books in short bursts to redefining productivity on your terms. So if you've ever hesitated before taking a risk or wondered how to make boldness a sustainable part of your life, this episode is for you. So let's get into it. Here now is my conversation with Anne Marie Anderson. Enjoy. Anne Marie, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to another productive conversation.
I love it. Let's go.
All right. So the thing that piqued my interest when we were kind of getting ready for this conversation is the idea of audacity and the idea of cultivating it. And I think a lot of people, when they think about audacity, it's not something that seems to be cultivated. It's just something that kind of shows up and it's in fits and starts, as opposed to something that you can kind of foster and nurture and that it's very much there's an intensity around it, and maintaining that intensity can be tricky for people. So can you share right out of the gate, when that word comes to mind, especially in the opening part of the book, that idea of audacity, how have you been able not just to cultivate it, but maybe sustain it? And that's a big piece that I think people really need to kind of wrap their head around.
Yeah, I love that you said there's an intensity around it, because we can create whatever vibe around audacity that we want. You are absolutely, in my opinion, not born audacious. And I certainly was not. I am an introvert by nature still, even though I speak on television and do all of that. So it is something that I think you need to grow. And first of all, audacity itself, the definition is a willingness to take bold risks. And that takes practice. And as you said, sustainability. So, Mike, if I can back up for a second and just say there's 3 components to living audaciously in my mind. There's the mindset. And that is, honestly, it's optimism. When you look at it, it is, you're playing a basketball game, you're down by 12 at the half. Why do you come out and play the second half? Because maybe if your offense gets together, your defense stops the other team, you can win that game. But if you don't win that game, you're going to survive the outcome. So it isn't about always getting what you want. It's about taking the risk and being okay with the outcome. That's the first part, the mindset. But you can sit on your couch and be optimistic all day long and get nothing done until you take action. So there's the audacious behavior. And that's the taking bold risks, doing something surprising, saying no. When those two get married consistently, then you've got an audacious identity, and you go from, what is Mike doing? To, well, that's Mike.
Yep.
He swings for the fences. And that's where the sustainability comes in, is audacity isn't one big, bold move. They are micro moves, micro risks, micro decisions that add up to a full audacious identity.
And I think that's the hard part for a lot of people, is the idea of big, bold doesn't feel like, bit by bit doesn't get you that big dopamine hit that people want, right? Like it doesn't, it's that old, the image of the iceberg where you see most of it below the surface and so on. It's all those little things. And to me, that that's one of the biggest problems when it comes to managing one's relationship with time and being productive, is this idea of fits and starts as opposed to just making bit by bit progress, getting a little bit better every single time. David Robinson, who is my favorite basketball player of all time, mainly due to just his integrity, the way he carried himself. I mean, he seemed to be, and he passed that on to like a Tim Duncan and so on and so forth. And it's all culture oriented. That to me is, I think, a big part of it is the culture. How are you able to, and how have you been able to be audacious and cultivate that when often cultures can kind of maybe, I wouldn't say push back, but maybe create friction along the way for that cultivation to take place?
Yeah, I love it, especially when you're talking about the Admiral, right?
Yeah.
David Robinson, and the way that he was consistent. Certainly the NBA, especially at that time, but even now, wasn't known for the healthiest culture.
Mm-hmm.
So he lived within his own, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and that is what I put out in the world. The same thing true for individual audacity. You might be in a job or a position or a relationship that doesn't support you taking risks and making bold moves. And that's where you really need to analyze, are you where you're supposed to be? When you talk about that dopamine hit, I think what we look at too often is the destination. We've all heard it's about the journey, not the destination. Right?
Yeah.
But there is no end to an audacious life. It is a continual growth process. And that's where I'd want to take the intensity out of it for your listeners and say, it doesn't have to be, bam, you're doing it all at the same time. It is that you are moving forward towards your goals, your vision, your values, and who you want to be every day, bit by bit. In terms of getting the dopamine hit, you have to celebrate the wins. And what I tell people, the audacity, the victory of audacity is not in the outcome, it's in the action. So I'd argue you can get the dopamine hit because you did say no today. You did reach out to somebody who see if they can mentor you. You did write the first few sentences of your book, whatever it is. That's where the victory is, not in the finished product.
Right. Do you think that based on what you do for a living, working in the sports area, that seeing that kind of level of performance helps in terms of seeing things? Because I've seen some stuff happen when I've watched highlights. I mean, I'm a Bengals fan too, a Cincinnati Bengals fan. So when Joe Burrow threw that touchdown pass this year, where he was like almost on the ground, and it was on a highlight reel where he just flung it in, and it was people like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Like those audacious, like they seem like those moves are just pure talent. And I wonder, does you get reminders of that? I would imagine regularly. Are there other ways that remind yourself other than, I mean, the story that you tell at the beginning? Do you like have a journal, or do you chronicle these things to kind of keep you on the path of living an audacious life and cultivating that?
No, actually.
Okay.
Because when you're looking at something that Joe Burrow does, right, that's beyond 99.9999% of us to
Yes.
even dream of doing. So like that isn't relatable for me in terms of an idea. I love it and I find it impressive and entertaining, but it doesn't really relate to my own audacity. And that's something that I run across from people. They'll say, well, you're audacious because you must have been born that way because you put yourself out on television. But it isn't that. My inspiration for daily audacity comes in the reminder of my plan for what I want to do next. I don't look 5 years down the line. My horse is going, I don't look 5 years down the line. I'm looking 1 year at a time, perhaps the most. And I set a goal maybe for myself at the beginning of the year. Here we are deep into 2025 and I don't have one yet.
Yeah.
So it's really like I am finding the audacity within myself to be excited. What I am really good at is checking myself and saying, what's my level of engagement? Am I feeling disengaged? Am I feeling uninspired? If so, in what area? That's where my audacity comes from, is when I'm waking up in the morning, do I look forward to what I've got to do? If not, then how can I change what I'm doing so I can wake up excited about it?
One of the things that I found during my research, and it like landed with me, especially the second sentence. And it led to the third sentence. So don't expect to eliminate your barriers. You're never going to conquer fear or own time. Instead, learn to navigate through them. What drives me nuts in my work, Anne-Marie, is this idea that we can manage time. Like, I hate the term time management because it presupposes that you own time, that time is something you possess. But the thing is, and you mentioned this, like, life, the journey, the destination piece, all that stuff, time moves on after we're gone. Like, so time is, and so to me, when people say they're going to manage time, to me, it's about the relationship with time. So can you dive into the idea of people want to set boundaries and they want to, they have this idea and if things don't go their way, like if they're out of their control, then they all of a sudden, kind of withdraw or they resist. And that's where the friction presents itself. So when we go back to that idea of you're never going to conquer for your own time, instead learn to navigate through them. Can you give me an example of when you had to go, you know what, this is not something that I'm just going to have to navigate these waters as opposed to try to control them?
Absolutely. Regarding time, there's something that I call the urgency fallacy, and it is our entire lives feel urgent, right? You get the text, the email, you got somebody at the door saying they're hungry, one of your kids, perhaps, you've got, something you've got to sign, a bill you've got to pay. The whole thing is urgent.
Yep.
It feels that way. We've been taught that urgent means it's important. And I say it's not.
No.
Because what's important is the thing that's going to drive you towards a more fulfilling, satisfying, maybe service-based life. That's what's important. But you still have to take care of what's urgent. So what I tell people, first of all, is you need to differentiate between the two. And here's the easiest way to do that, Mike. Things that are urgent are reactionary. They're imposed upon us. Somebody asks us for an email. Somebody asks us for that. And they have a deadline, an impending deadline. We all love our to-do list, right? You scratch it off, check it off. Many of us, including me, are guilty of like writing something on the list, even when we've already done it.
Yep.
Right?
We're all guilty of that. Yes.
Right? That dopamine hit to just cross that off the list. So that's what is urgent to get that done. Here's the facts. Urgent's always going to get done. You are going to answer the email. Urgent doesn't necessarily require deep thought or consideration. Things that are important to you, which moves you forward to your values, vision, and goals, whether you're starting a business, a new adventure, whether you're writing a book, we tend to say, well, when things calm down, when I have more time, I will for sure get to this. That never happens. Urgent never ends. So scheduling time for what's important is critical. Now, when you're saying, well, okay, have you have an example of something that doesn't work? Perfect example for me is when I started to write the book.
Right.
Because I am a full-time broadcaster. I am a full-time keynote speaker. I am a mother of 3. And for reasons unbeknownst to me, I decided to write a book. Right. So
I love the dedication at the start of the book too, by the way. Isn't that that was like, I shared it on social and I'm like, and it was like, never a realer dedication ever have I seen.
yeah. Yeah, the dedication to my 3 children, and all it says is, please clean your rooms. And when they opened the book, I had them do the unboxing and they looked at it and they were like, really? And I said, am I wrong? And they're like, no, you're not.
But it embodies the work itself. It's a pretty audacious way to kind of open a book too, right? Like, there's like, there's a bit of like, to my, normally be like to my partner, to my kids, they love it. Yours is very much, it embodies that in that sentence without it explicitly stating it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I knew I had their attention.
Yeah.
I knew they were going to read that much
of
the book. You know what I mean? So while I had their attention, I thought I would tell them, get it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I started writing the book, I decided, okay, I'm going to get up at 4:30 every day and write for an hour and then get on with all my other jobs in my life. And I did that, and it was horrible. I was exhausted by the time I got to 6 o'clock. The kids are like, can we have dinner? I'm like, If I had an 8 o'clock ESPN game, forget about it. I was up at 4:30. I was exhausted by the time the game came. So, and I wasn't particularly inspired. So for me, that didn't work. And that's where I came up. For me, what does work is 4 15-minute blocks a day. I was still going to get my hour in, but I set alarms. And when that alarm goes off, everything gets shut down for just 15 minutes, Mike. Everything that's urgent really can wait 15 minutes. You can make dinner in 15 minutes. You can answer that email in 15 minutes. You can return the text in 15 minutes, sign the permission slip, pay the bill. All of that, if you wait for 15 minutes to focus on what's important to you. So for me, that was writing a little bit. For somebody else that's starting a business, that may be reaching out to somebody who is in the business that you're in and seeing if you can make contact or get a mentor. It is a way to make progress every day. If you're an artist, that's 15 minutes to create. And when you do that consistently, right, and it can be 3 20-minute blocks, 2 half-hour blocks, whatever works for you, you are creating time each day for what's important, and it no longer gets put on the back burner.
One of the things that I think because this comes up quite frequently, the idea of urgency is not necessarily immediate. And also it's urgent to them, not necessarily to you as well. So I've had it where people will get like a ton of emails from, say, their boss or whatever. And I said, have you ever gone back to them and say, well, which is the most important? And they don't track that. They're not, the boss is like, it's more of a like, get it out of my face. But one thing that I think people should try, I wonder if this is something you recommend as well, or if you've tried it before, is don't respond to that one email. Like, see how far you can, not necessarily across the board, but just test it. Because hearing it is one thing. Getting empirical, actual proof that, oh, I waited an hour to check my email and nobody bit my head off, or only one person did. So that one person I know I need to deal with. I think that's the other thing too, is we may, if it's the one person that demands this stuff, demands the urgent of us, we tend to group it all. Well, emails, I have to take care of all of email. No, just that person's, just that one. Everybody else can wait. So I think experimentation plays a role in that. Do you find experimentation for you and for those that are going to read your book is part of this process as well in terms of cultivating audacity?
Yes. First of all, I love that. Seeing which one. I'm always impressed by the people that say, I check email twice a day. And I'm like, gosh, I need to get there. There's so much stuff that happens. But testing it all out, because, and I say this too with just rejection, right? When you get a no, it's not a period at the end of the sentence. It's a comma to redirect you. So it's the same thing. Let's say you're creating important blocks of time in your urgent day. Well, as I said, the hour that I was trying to do absolutely didn't work. So that test was not for me. Here's a different way I can do it. And I think that is constant. Sometimes we dig our feet in the sand and we say, I committed to doing this and doing it this way, and I'm going to keep doing it, even if it's not working, even if I'm not enjoying it. And the flexibility is an important part of Audacity.
How do you keep from burning out when you are cultivating Audacity? Because I think that's we've talked about the bit by bit, which I think is definitely part of that. But I think that, again, that intensity piece, there's still that correlation there, right? Can you think of a non-intense example of you in a situation where you demonstrated Audacity, where the average person or the person listening to this would go, oh yeah, that didn't seem like it was too tough to be that audacious?
Let me think about that, because I don't like any of it to be a struggle and to be hard. There'll be people that take 7 years to write a book, and there'll be people who say, I want to write a book in 3 months. Well, that's self-imposed deadlines on both parts. So it's kind of like the heat on a stove. You control the intensity. If you're somebody who works really well with that kind of pressure and intensity, you can level it up. I guess the thing is, whose timing are you living on? Your timeline is your own, and it's decided by you. And everybody's is different. So it's about, who are you answering for? Who are you being audacious for?
Right.
It should be for you, to benefit you. And that sounds selfish sometimes. And the example I give is, let's say you're in a job and you decide you want to change because you want to spend more time with your kids. Are you making that decision because you want to spend more time with your kids, or are you making it because you should spend more time with your kids? Because either way, right, your kids will get more time. It's about, are you going to be resenting them because you've given up something else? Or are you creating a life to have it for them?
Yeah.
So there's no timeline on that. So even though your family would benefit from more time with you, if you're resentful of it, if it is not something that fits into your plan, then it's not going to be healthy for anybody anyway. And figure out a different way to organize your life, because Audacity needs to benefit you so that you don't burn out. And so you do keep going. You're finding some enjoyment in it. If you're just grinding, especially if you're trying to make money,
yeah,
if you're like, I want to make money.
You make bad decisions. You're going to make bad decisions. Like I've done that where I'm like, I need to do this. And then because I think what can happen when you are trying to be too intense with it is that you get reckless. And this is an example of where I think, as we're talking about this, I'm a guy who will put things on my to-do list that most people would go, why do you need to put that on your to-do list? So for example, I'll put things on my to-do list like spend time with Colton, my son. And they're like, well, wouldn't you do that naturally? I'm like, no. And they're like, wait, what? But I'm like, hold on. I go, by putting it on this list, it's now an intention. And I have a way to pay attention to it. So to your point about, well, are you going to do it your way? That by putting it on my to-do list and creating a level of importance around that. And it's something that, yes, naturally I will spend time with my kids, but it's more of the intentionality behind it. It's a much more powerful experience where my son and I can sit and talk about him playing guitar because he's learning guitar and me saying, hey, the other day it was on TikTok of all things. And the Spin Doctors came up. We both remember the Spin Doctors, right? So they're like a band that I saw them in concert. They were great. They're like a jam band. Some people will not know. Most people listening to this might know who they are, but they're a band from the 90s, right? And they played a song that was not well known. It was Refrigerator Car. It was the guy from Spin Doctors. And I shared it with my son. And I said, dude, do you think you can learn how to play this? It's an 8/9 time. He's like, oh, it's pretty cool. Who is this band? I'm like, dude, this whole, the Spin Doctors, Blues Traveler, Soul, like these were all part of, and we went down this, and you know what I got to do at the end of the day? Check off that box. And that to me, I guess, is a form of audacity, because most people are like, well, how dare you? Like, wouldn't you just do that naturally? It's the same thing with holiday lights. I have that on my list. Like, hey, put up the decide when to put up the holiday lights. Well, why? You know when to do it. No, I don't. I've got a busy life. I don't want to be driving down the street and see somebody putting up holiday lights and go, right, I got to do that. I don't want to have to think about that stuff. So right. I mean, the way, again, being productive and staying in that state of productiveness is a very personal thing. And it does take, I believe, some audacity to be willing to say, damn the torpedoes, and I'm going to do it my way.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, you get the dopamine hit from spending time with your son.
Of course.
The dopamine hit.
The best kind.
The best kind of dopamine hit. And we're not even talking about the benefits for him, which is within his experience, which are huge, right? Like my father wanted to listen to me. We wanted to talk about music.
Yeah.
That's what he's going to remember. Your email that you're responding to is going to get forgotten pretty quickly. But that's the deal. And I'll also say this, Mike, I think what we need to do, and I talk about this with money as a barrier, is that we need to see money as energy. For me and for you, we've all grown up differently with money stories. Some people didn't have much at all. Some people had plenty. Some people, parents were very tight. That was my family. We didn't have a lot of money, but we held it very tight. My ex-husband had no money and no heat, so it was like everybody's experience is different. But what you can realize is using money to buy back time, if you had it. So some people want to stick their head in the sand. You have to look at your bank balance. I have a friend who was afraid of looking at her bank balance. She made it part of her morning routine. She would wash her face, brush her teeth, look at her bank balance.
Right.
Just for a minute. And she would say, okay, there's $10 there. Thank you for being there. $1,000. Thank you for being there. Whatever it is, as she watched it grow. When you start paying attention to how you're spending your time, there's inevitably going to be some things that you really don't enjoy doing. You talked about Christmas lights. I don't like putting up Christmas lights.
I don't think anybody does, really.
I want that time back so I could hire somebody in exchange for money to get that time and that energy back. And so that's something I had to do. I suggest keeping a log of how you spend your time, all of it for a week. This much time commuting, working, eating, socializing, scrolling with family, exercising, whatever it is, and doing bills, paperwork. And then if you can outsource some of those in exchange for some money within your budget, you can buy back that time to spend. And I did the same thing you were talking about, where I hired somebody to help me when the kids were little with the things that I didn't want to do, like dishes, grocery shopping, so that I could be more invested in bath, book, and bed.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting now with the advent of generative AI is I'm using it for some of those things, like tonight I have to make dinner, and my kids are picky. Well, my wife's gluten-free, my son's a picky eater, and we've had Asian food a couple of times this week already. And I'm like, I look in the freezer and I go, here's what I have. I have some beef that I can cook. We haven't had beef this week. And I'm like, hey, AI, what are some simple, quick recipes? Blah, 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 blah. I need to be gluten-free. And I just went downstairs when my son was watching TV and I said, here are the 5 things I could make tomorrow for dinner. Which one interests you the most? And he goes, well, all of them look good. I'm like, well, we got to pick one. So good job, AI, for coming up with 5. But now I have the recipe based on my ingredients that I have. So I don't have to think. And I have an alarm that says, hey, you need to start. As soon as I knew what I was making, I'm like, hey, device, I'm not going to say it out louder, it's going to go off. Tell me when, set the alarm so that at this time I start prepping dinner. And that's it. I don't have to think about that again. And everyone wins. I think that the biggest thing, and this goes back to AI and some of the stuff you've talked about already, and it all comes back to fear, doesn't it? Like, I think a lot of it just comes back to, this idea of eliminating fear, or I'm afraid to do this. And for those that like, how does Audacity beat back fear, or at least dance with fear?
Yes, I love it. You have to make friends with fear. So I love you say dance with fear, because what are we taught? Push fear away, conquer fear, overcome your fears. Fear is going to be with us the whole time in our lives. It can be a real guide. You have to understand, you're going to hold fear close. You'll see what it is you're afraid of. Is it embarrassment, judgment, being exposed, failure, whatever it is? And then I suggest catastrophizing. What's the worst thing that could happen in this situation? We've always been told, but what's the worst that could happen? But I mean, take it all the way to the end where you die destitute and alone. And how likely is that to happen?
Yeah.
Not likely. But the example I always give is my first time on television. I was supposed to be in a little regional television, but I was an ESPN producer first. So somebody got sick. They put me in ESPN2, my first time ever on live television, which was in 70 million homes. My first time on live television. I was sick to my stomach, terrified, crying outside the stadium, which is exactly what you want from your college football sideline reporter. And I was talking to my husband at the time, and he said, well, what's the worst that could happen? And I said, oh, the worst that could happen is I can be so bad on air that not only will I never be on air again, but I'll lose my producing job too. And if I lose my producing job, I'll lose my entire career in television. And if I lose my career, I'm going to be a miserable person to live with. And you will have no choice but to leave me, because I won't be able to be a good mother to our children who haven't even been born yet. And without a family and without a career, I will die destitute and alone. And he was like, whoa, of course that's ridiculous. You take it all the way to that end. But I was afraid of being embarrassed. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of being bad, being exposed. I went on air, Mike, and all of that was true. Of course I was terrible, right?
Yeah.
Of course I was exposed as not being good at this. I was judged. I was embarrassed. And I survived. And that goes back to what I talked about at the beginning. The winning in Audacity is not in the outcome. It's in the action. And the fact that I got up and did it, and then I got up and did it the next week, and the only thing that was better about the second time was that it wasn't the first time. That's where the Audacity victory is. And that's where you don't go for the big dopamine hit. you're like, I did it and I survived.
Anne-Marie, this has been a great conversation. And I know we could dive deeper into things, but I want to make sure that I'm respectful of your time and our listeners' time. So where can people pick up the book and keep up with what you're doing?
Oh, I love that. Thank you. They can buy the book, Cultivating Audacity, Dismantle Doubt and Let Yourself Win, anywhere you buy your books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target. You can find out more about what I'm doing. I'm a speaker, so I work with large corporations and small groups talking about Audacity. My website is AnneMarieAnderson.com. There's an E on the end of Anne. And you can always find me on Instagram too at Anne-Marie Anderson TV or cultivating_Audacity.
Anne-Marie, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you. I loved our productive conversation, Mike.
Thanks to Anne-Marie for joining me on the program today. You can check out all of the relevant links, show notes, everything wherever you are listening to this podcast right now. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Overcast, wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, wherever you are getting this podcast right now, if you want to make sure you don't miss a single episode of what's to come, easily search through the archives, subscribe to the show, hit the subscribe button. That way you won't miss a single episode of what we've got in store for you, as well as to be able to search through the archives and find episodes featuring David Allen, Gretchen Rubin, Seth Godin, and many more. That's it for now. I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.